Shalom Aleichem. Mishnah Yomi is continuing for the 9th of Nisan. This is Rabbi Kovacs, and we are starting the 5th chapter in Pesachim. It's a very exciting change of pace here. The first 4 chapters were dealing with Erev Pesach, what happens right before Pesach, and we got into various minhagim in the 4th chapter, and now we're talking about the actual Korban Pesach, the offering, the Paschal lamb offering. It could be a lamb or a kid, we're going to see. And the first Mishnah in chapter 5 gets into the timing of when we bring the Pesach in that day. So Mishnah Aleph teaches Tamid Nishchat B'Shmona Umechetza, the continual offering. Tamid is the daily offering. We learn about this in Vayikra chapter 6, Leviticus 6. The daily offering was 1 lamb in the morning and 1 lamb in the afternoon. Here we're talking about the lamb in the afternoon because it says that this tamid, this lamb, was slaughtered at 8.5 hours into the day. And these days are halachic days where you take the daylight hours, divide by 12 to get the length of each hour. So 8.5 hours into the day is already well into the afternoon. Karev b'teish mechetza, and it's actually burnt on the altar at 9.5 hours into the day. The Tamidim are carbonot ola. The ola goes up on the mizbeach. Everything is burnt on the altar. And we also see it takes an hour. The Rav Bartner says it takes an hour to actually prepare the tamid to be burnt. We're going to read all about this in Kodshim in Tamid. There's actually a Masechta called Tamid, which is everything you wanted to know about the continual daily offering, and we're afraid to ask. We are going to answer all those questions when we get to Tamid in a few years. So this first din, the 8.5 hours, that's a normal day. The Mishnah continues, Ba'arve Pesachim, if it's Erev Pesach, Nishcha b'sheva umechetze, v'karev b'shmona mechetze. You move it up an hour earlier. Bein b'chol, bein b'shabbat. Whether this day is a weekday or a Shabbat, we go 1 hour earlier to give time for the Pesach offering, the Paschal lamb. Now the Mishnah brings an exception, Chol Erev Pesach li'o be'erev Shabbat. If the 14th of Nisan is a Friday, Nishchat b'sheish mechetzia. So again, the Korban Tamid, the afternoon portion of the daily offering, is brought at 6.5 hours into the day. Karev b'tei sheva mechetzia Pesach acharav. And then the Tamid is burned on the altar at 7.5 hours, and then they start bringing the Korban Pesach. Now, the reason for this switch in time is what the Bartner explains, that the Tamid offerings, the morning and afternoon continual offerings, are kind of bookends. So we don't bring any offerings before the morning Tamid, and we don't bring most offerings after the afternoon Tamid. So on a normal day, we wait until 8.5 hours into the day to bring that afternoon closing offering so that people have time to bring Nadarim, Nadavot, Nazirut offerings, the things that they've pledged during that day. But in Erev Pesach, we bump it up an hour, so there's time to slaughter the Korban Pesach. It's one of the exceptions that's brought after the afternoon Tamid. And then if it's Erev Shabbos, we need to not only slaughter the Korban Pesach, we need to roast it before Shabbos comes in. Because while we eat the Korban Pesach on Friday night after nightfall, we cannot roast the Korban Pesach after nightfall. The roasting does not override Shabbos. When Erev Pesach, the 14th of Nisan, is also Erev Shabbos. The Bartner also explains the 6.5 hours into the day is when afternoon really begins, when the shadows start tilting towards afternoon, and this is also the time of prayer for the afternoon prayer for Mincha. What we call Mincha is connected the Tamid, the earliest time of the Tamid of the afternoon offering was 6.5 hours into the day. That's what we call Mincha Gedola, the earliest time to pray the afternoon prayer. We also mentioned this in the 4th chapter of Brachot, Tfilat HaShachar, about when we daven, and we talked about there that the Avot, Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, they established the concept of tefillah, of prayer, but the actual timing of the prayer every day is in accordance with the daily offerings in the temple. Now, Mishnah Bet introduces us to a concept of lishma, of for the right purpose, or for the right intention, that many of the activities around karbanot, around the offerings in the temple, had to be performed with awareness and intent that these activities fulfill the purpose and are for the specific type of offering being offered. After all, a lamb or a goat, it could be a Pesach, it could be a Shlamim, it could be an Ola. So the Kohen and the other people involved in the service have to have awareness and intention for the correct type of offering. So Mishnah Beit reads a Pesach, the Paschal lamb, sheshachatu shelo lishmo, it was slaughtered for the wrong purpose. The kibil, or he received the dripping blood in a kli, the hilech, or walked that blood to the altar, vizarak, or threw that blood on the altar, shelo lishmo, for the wrong purpose, O lishmo v'shelo lishmo, or he partially did it for the right purpose for the Pesach, and other activities were done for the wrong purpose. O shelo lishmo v'lishmo, or he started off with the wrong intent and then later corrected himself, and in the later activities had a correct intent for Pesach, pasul. If there's any invalidating intent for a different offering, this Pesach is no good. Now the Mishnah explains what's an example of a not for the right intention here. What does it mean it was for the right purpose and also not? L'shem Pesach, l'shem shlamim. He did one of the activities, for example, the slaughter, with a Pesach in mind, and then the next activity, l'shem shlamim, for a shlamim, a peace offering. So he did one of the other of these critical avodot, the shchita, the kabbalah, the halacha, the zrika, for the wrong intention. Then he's trafed up his carbon Pesach. Similarly, the Mishnah says, what's an example of not for the right intent and for the right intent? L'shem shlamim, l'shem Pesach. If he started off intending a shlamim, then later intended a Pesach, doesn't fix it. Now the Mishnah says shlamim because you might have thought a shlamim is not so different than a Pesach, because we're going to learn a leftover Pesach that was not used on the 14th of Nisan can actually be recycled into a shlamim, which is not typical of other offerings. Of course, it also messes up the Pesach if he had intention that it's an ola or a hatas or a nazir's carbon or anything else. Any mispurposed, misdirected intention regarding the Pesach will mess up his Pesach. It's an important hashkafic point. We can learn from this that when we're working on something very critical and something critical to our spiritual development, we need to have the right intent when we start and in the middle and carry it through to the end. Yashar kochachem, Shabbat Shalom.